Hey everybody, and welcome to Workshop Wednesday. It's week 4. This week we're going to chat about boundaries. So this is going to be about how to be the bouncer of your own destiny. Like I said in my post earlier today, any Roadhouse references and or quotes will be gladly welcome. So boundaries are a funny thing. We tend not to think about them until we have an issue, right? Like we realize that we are lacking in said boundaries. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Somebody asks you a favor. Can you cover an extra shift at your 9 to 5? Can you do some babysitting? Anything like that. Anytime somebody asks you to do something or for something, especially when it comes to using your time, the first thing that goes through your head is automatically, why me? Do they not think that I have my own life? Why is it that they always ask me for this? Do they think I'm always at their beck and call? Things like that. So on and so forth. What this is an emotional response to a factual circumstance. What I mean by that is if we get angry or something, we get angry at something that doesn't really require an emotional response. The person isn't asking us how we feel about something. They're asking us, can we do something? Are we able to do something? We tend to get irritated because we have a feeling about their question, and we sometimes have a feeling about our own response to that question, which is what we need to dive into. A lot of it is guilt. We don't want to feel guilty about saying no to somebody. It's a question of, can you do something? And you don't want your response to be anything other than, sure, I'd love to help. And you want to mean that earnestly. If you're like me and you have your heart and your head in that servant's mindset, it really bugs us when we can't be there for everybody. We feel guilty for not helping. We especially feel guilty if we don't rearrange our schedule to help someone else, which is, it's nice to help people, but it's completely insane that we constantly would rearrange our schedule to benefit somebody else. We need to be kind, and I'm all for that. I encourage it. But we have to be very, very careful and understand the toll that sacrificing our time constantly without any boundaries to it is going to have on us in the long run. So when we finally realize that we've got some issues with the boundaries, a lot of times it comes too late. It comes before we have... how am I trying to say this? It comes too late and we lash out. We don't want to lash out. That's not our thing. It's not what we do. We don't want to start being angry every time somebody asks us for help. But we have that emotional response because there's something that we're avoiding wanting to feel. We don't want to upset somebody else. We don't want to, lose an opportunity for work. We don't want to lose an opportunity for friends or connections and things like that. And a lot of that has to do with not having boundaries in place. And even if you do have those boundaries in place, you're not quite living up to them, which means you're not really living up to yourself and you're not being honest with yourself, which is something that we can work on. It's something that I work on daily because I hate telling people no. I hate it. I've always hated it. But I also hate the toll that it takes on me and now my family if you constantly prioritize someone else outside yourself. So none of the scenarios discussed are desirable and none of them are unusual. Like I said, I have to work at this myself. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. So when we talk about an emotional response, angry, a lot of times that is going to resonate with guilt of not not being able to come through for somebody, especially if people have called you, oh, you're the dependable one, things like that. You can be dependable and you can be reliable and you can still have boundaries. So when we learn to be the bouncer of our own destiny, what we have to do is we have to toss out what's not working and we have to bring in what does work. In some cases, again, reference the Roadhouse, that's Patrick Swayze. When you don't have that availability, you toss in some tools, tips, and tricks that I'm going to share for making sure that not only you set those boundaries, but stick to them. First thing you want to look at is, when do your emotional responses tend to occur? When do you tend to have those, bouts of anger or fear or concern about someone who is asking you to do something? Think about that. Okay. The next thing, once you've thought about that, is to take a step back and then really look at the emotional response. What is it? Is it anger? Is it fear? Et cetera, et cetera. And ask yourself why you're responding that way. Sometimes it doesn't have to be this big, long, drawn out conversation with yourself. You can think of these things. Usually the first thing that comes to your mind is going to be what you want to focus on. Is it a fear? Is it really an anger? And also, is it an emotion that is popping up because you have been asked something that reasonably requires an emotional response? Sometimes that happens. So, kind of keep up with why you're feeling what you feel like. When you feel guilty, ask yourself why you feel guilty for saying no. Are you afraid that people are going to think less of you for not sacrificing yourself for them? Or are you afraid to prioritize yourself because you think that you're going to miss out on something? All of these things I've felt. I know that you guys have felt them before too. It's completely human. It's completely natural. If it's the case that you think someone's going to think less of you for not prioritizing yourself, let them think that. You don't want that kind of negativity in your life. Kind of like you don't want someone to tell you not to eat chocolate, not to have that cup of coffee. You don't need that negativity in your life. So if you're afraid that someone's going to think less of you for saying, hey, I've got to step back from this, I can't do that. As long as you say it in a decently kind manner, you're all good. There is nothing wrong with helping people. And that's where the boundaries come in. It's because I advocate for helping people. I love it. But there's nothing wrong with helping as long as you're not needlessly sacrificing. Don't martyr yourself for someone or something that's not going to be worth it in the end. That's a big trap that we fall into. Especially coming, out of a life in public service, the job is extremely important. So I'm not saying that your job isn't important and that you shouldn't try and do what you can to help out. What I'm saying is, don't martyr yourself for a cause that is not going to benefit yourself as a person. Hang with me on this one. The caveat here is that work, friends, family are all important. They are very important things that you should treasure. But if you're unavailable to do something, it is okay to say, I can't do that right now. Never feel bad for saying no. I'm raising my hand here because I have to practice that on the daily. Don't feel bad. Don't feel guilty for saying no, because that's one of the very first steps in setting your boundaries. When we have established the boundaries, we exude the confidence in the rest of our life. It gets easier. It really does, I promise. I used to be horrible at it. Now I'm less than horrible at it. When you set the boundaries, you exude that confidence in the rest of your life that helps you tackle anything that you want to do. So it will also make saying no a little bit easier from time from time to time. And you have to understand that you're 100% worthy of telling someone I can't do something without having to justify it. You know, you're under no obligation to explain your boundary to anyone. And I will say this until I'm blue in the face. You are under no obligation to explain your boundary or boundaries to anyone. They are yours. If you want to share them, totally on board with that. Open up the lines of communication, but don't feel like you have to tell people the reason you can't do something. It's not necessarily any of their business. I understand we don't want to hurt people's feelings and things like that, but when we start to go down the path of, well, I don't want to hurt people's feelings, be human, you know, be kind, treat people like you'd want to be treated. You don't have to yell at them that you refuse to do something, but at the same time, you also don't have to justify the fact that you're setting up your own restrictions and your own boundaries. There is never anything wrong with that, and you don't ever have to justify that to anyone. One exercise that I have found to help you get comfortable with setting your own boundaries and sticking to them, it sounds super cheesy, but you go into a room and you physically close a door. It's as simple as that. You walk into a room, you think, okay, what are my boundaries? You know, what am I struggling with right now that I want to be able to, you know, shut out and therefore focus on myself, focus on my family, focus on, you know, my dogs, etc., etc. Think about that circumstance and physically shut the door. That's it. My husband will laugh at me oftentimes because sometimes I'll do it a few extra times for good measure. I will literally be opening and closing a door as I'm thinking and working through the challenge that setting and keeping my own boundaries can have. And I just have to tell him, nope, I'm working on my boundaries. It's okay. And he understands and he leaves me alone. So it does look kind of silly, but the physical act of thinking that through and shutting that door, it has helped me. I don't know if I can trademark that, but, you know, give it a try. If you want another way, try journaling. I know that I talk all the time about journaling, but it's really a cool way to kind of get yourself in the mindset. You know, you don't have to sit there and write the great American novel or anything like that. My favorite is stream of consciousness. You know, James Joyce, worked for him, works for me. It's just kind of a way to dump things out of your brain so that you have a clearer head. And when you're working on, you know, being able to tell people no, and you're trying to find your own way to phrase it so that you can have those solid lines, you know, that's something that helps me. Another thing is time blocking. If you block out time, that can help with the understanding when you would and wouldn't be available to cover a shift, babysit for a friend, you know, yada, yada, whatever it is that people are asking you to do. The goal here is to have not so much the emotional response to someone asking you, hey, can you help me with this? You want to be able to have a yes or no. Again, I'll say it, you don't have to justify your action or your reasons for not, you don't have to justify having boundaries. But the more you get used to saying, no, I'm not available, or no, I don't want to do that, etc., the more that that's going to bolster your confidence in everything else that you do. It all works hand in hand with everything. So that's about all I've got for a chat on boundaries. Now I'm going to go watch Roadhouse. But try the door thing. If you do, let me know if it works for you. Let me know if you think I'm absolutely insane, because, you know, sometimes I think I am. But feel free to post to this video any thoughts, questions, or comments. Anything that you find that helps you establish your own boundaries, you know, that I didn't mention. If you feel like it, share them, because, you know, I can use all the help I can get. So thank you for watching. Everyone have a great rest of your week, and we will chat next Wednesday.